Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Globally Connected at FIT. Beginning in 2020, Globally Connected became a series of 45-minute-long virtual discussions designed to advance global education at FIT. They're led by FIT students and faculty, alumni, friends, and colleagues from around the world. Today's talk is Cultural Mapping of American and Chinese Dreams, Imagining Across Trans-Pacific Boundaries. And our guest speaker is Dr. Melody Yunsi Lee. Moderating the talk today is Janice G., who's a student and cultural fellow. Janice is an illustration BFA major graduating in 2025 with minors in color studies, English, history of art, and psychology. Her hometown is Qingdao, China, but she's a longtime international student, having lived and studied in New York for 8 years. She went to high school on nearby Long Island. She's also in the Phi Theta Kappa Honor Society. So welcome everyone, and I will turn it over to Janice.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to join our talk. And thank you so much for Dr. Lee to joining us for your talk, Cultural Mapping of American and Chinese Dreams. We're so excited. And to introduce Dr. Lee, Dr. Melody Yingzi Li is an assistant professor in Chinese studies at the University of Houston, Texas, and she has a PhD in comparative literature at Washington University in St. Louis. And she is also the co-editor of Affective, Geographies and Narratives of Chinese Diaspora. And her research interest includes Asian diaspora literature, modern Chinese literature and culture, translation study, performance studies, and cultural identities. Thank you so much, Dr. Lee. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Janice. First, I want to thank Helen, Alex, Kyung-hee for organizing this talk. I'm very honored to be here. I wish I could be in New York with you all, but it's really like my honor to share my work with you. This book just came out a month ago, so it's a celebration. Also, I know Lunar New Year is coming up, so happy Lunar New Year. So it's very special for me to share with my work with you as celebration of the Lunar New Year. I think I will first introduce my work using 20-25 minutes, and then I welcome any question and discussion, which I look forward to. And meanwhile, if you have any question in the middle, feel free to jump in. So my book, as you see in this title, is called Transpacific Cartographies. And I want to start with how I started this work. So it's actually connected with my personal experience. I grew up in overseas Chinese village in Guangzhou, China, at the southern part of China, which is just 2 hours from Hong Kong. So it's actually one of the very largest and first overseas Chinese village in China, and a lot of like Southeast Asianists like who immigrated from China to there went back and built this town together. I grew up with my grandparents there, and then I started getting very interested in their sense of home and interested in Chinese diaspora in general. Later on, I went to Sun Yat-sen University as the first cohort of translation, School of Translation and Interpretation. My dream back then was to become a professional translator, interpreter. Then I found it very stressful. But however, like the first 3 years, I actually spent in like Zhuhai campus, which is the hometown of Yongwing. And if many of you may have heard of his name, he is the very first overseas Chinese student from China to the United States, like who went to Yale, and then he went back and initiated the program to send a lot of Chinese students from the government to US. So I learned about the overseas Chinese students' history because I was just there. So I got more and more interested in it. Later on, as you all know, I then came to the United States for my PhD, and I myself became an overseas Chinese student. And I then feel like very fascinated with the topic since we are one of the many population of this, but it was not like too largely studied in the literary studies in my field. So these personal episodes have led to my interest in Chinese immigrants and new Chinese diaspora literature. To situate my study into a larger social political context, we can first discuss the interesting yet complicated, ever-changing Sino-U.S. relationship. As you see this left side, I post this Chinese woman in Manhattan. You all are like in New York. So this is a very famous book in 2003 and by Zhou Li. And some of my friends actually said they came to the United States because they saw this book, which narrates an idealized image of Chinese immigrants who moved to the United States from mainland China in the early 1990s. Then later on, you also see representations like Beijing or in New York, which we will talk a little more about today, which portrays the life of the downtrodden diasporic Chinese in New York. So these two actually portray two conflicted images and portrayals, suggest that to diasporic Chinese communities, America is both welcoming and alienating, a contested side of belonging. In Chinese diaspora literature since China's geopolitical and economic rise about 3 decades ago, we constantly see a shifting, compressed, conflicted sense of identity and belonging that affects the members of the contemporary Chinese diaspora. And Sino-U.S. tensions have reached a boiling point recently, as you all know, as consequential events have unfolded one after another. Just to name a few, there was a U.S. diplomatic boycott of the Winter Olympics in Beijing in February 2022, followed by Biden giving Xi Jinping a strict warning in March not to provide material support to Russia in its invasion of Ukraine. Then in May, the speech by the U.S. Secretary of State Antony outlined President Biden's China strategy as one that positioned China as the, quote, the most serious long-term challenge to the international order. And as U.S. opponent in economic and political power. Then on August the 2nd, 2022, U.S. Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi visited Taiwan to show support for the island, which then triggered another angry response from China with the Chinese military conducting large-scale exercises around the island. We see these conflicts between China and the US is nothing new. It has been increasing over the past few years and has only been exacerbated by the pandemic, especially of the anti-Chinese sentiment and xenophobia has emerged during COVID. And as you see, like previous President Donald Trump has called, like referred to COVID-19 as the Chinese virus. And during COVID, like started doing this project with some of my students, chasing the anti-Asian racism and the incidents in Texas, New York, and California. And it's still an ongoing project of mapping the story map. This historical period of increasing Sino-U.S. tensions reminds us of the precarity in the sense of home that Asian American community has experienced. These Chinese diaspora writers create a sense of home that's imagined and imaginary. And although they may not improve the situation of diaspora in a practical sense, their works are significant because they evoke the collective sense of Chinese diaspora. Their sense of home, like my own, has been disrupted by the US-China rivalry. While claiming loyalty and belonging to both nations seemed more feasible in earlier times, it is now much more fraught to do so. You see these China's totally different reactions to the free US-born Chinese Olympians at the 2022 Beijing Winter Olympics proved the tricky issue of national affiliation and loyalty that the Chinese diaspora communities and Chinese Americans now face. Under this condition, in this volatile and political situation between the two countries, the ways that contemporary Chinese immigrant writers navigate the political rivalries and turbulences are worth studying. Some writers like Ha Jing and Yan Geling show more blatantly negative view of the nation state through personal stories, while others like Chen Qian, Shi Yu, and Rong Rong avoid talking about the politics and focus on affects. I attempt to capture and explore these ambivalences. My current study focuses on the new immigrants. The new immigrant literature emerging with this wave of new immigrants started in the 1980s, developed in the 90s, and matured in the early 2000s. These writings in 1980s focus on the immigrants' lives in the adopted land, like Zhou Li's Manhattan's China Lady, Su Wei's Traveler, and Xu Haixiang's Morning America. After the 2000s, immigrant works focus more on love and relationships. Home in these Chinese diaspora writings is constantly being remade, recreated, negotiated, and redefined. For these contemporary Chinese diaspora authors, I argue, writing about home is their way of rejecting being defined or located in response to society's impulse to categorize them. By mapping their own diasporic journey and that of their immigrant characters, these writers portray ideals, complicated rules that are barely stable, and the constant search for home that makes the mapping process intriguing and complicated. My book reinterprets home as a creative integration of physical locales that we belong to on diaspora roots, a knocking down of borders rather than setting up multiple ones. By looking beyond the either-or binary, we can focus on the Chinese diaspora's innovative endeavors of seeking home. My project reaffirms and further complicates the multiplicity and fluidity of home, as shown in previous scholarship on diaspora studies. As such, my project questions the previous binary discussion of home as either a specific locale or multiple locales, and reinterprets it as the creative integration of locales that we belong to on our routes, as well as a quest for self-identity in an imaginary geography. By looking beyond the either-or binary, we can focus on the innovative endeavors of seeking home. The words in this book map our productive tension between home as an idea of peace, security, and protection, and the many national dreams that either hijack or disrupt the idea of home. Home as a dialogical, psychological construct necessitates the mapping methodology. Built on these existing theoretical and critical works on literary cartographies and geographies, I argue that Chinese diasporic narratives discussed in this book represents cognitive maps that locate their characters within imaginary spatial constructs of home and abroad of China and the U.S. The cartographic narratives of diasporic writers, therefore, can be read as a way of creating a path for their diasporic characters and themselves, making sense of the world and their place in it. Most importantly, some of the writings I study have the cartographic characteristics that I want to capture. At the end of Ha Jing's A Free Life, 2007, the protagonist Nan has found a way to anchor himself beyond geographical boundaries by inscribing his own immigrant journey. In this poem, Homework, he literally sketches a map of an imaginary country, quote, under his pencil, a land is emerging, he says. I'm making a country. On the same map, he draws a chart. Railroads crisscross the landscape. Highways, pipelines, canals entwine. Sea lanes curve into the ocean. Airports raise a web of skyways, end quote. The places that he describes draw on America that Ha Jing has experienced, but in a way that highlights the crossing of imagination and impression. In the poem, he works at creating his home, with the pencil taking the lead in carving the twists, turns, and networks. In the novel, neither the nation-state of China nor Nan's adopted land of America provides him with a sense of home. Instead, Hajin features the notion that countries are where one finds a sense of shelter, a sense of belonging, and a stable place called home by highlighting the effective power of imaginary homeland and creating it through his own writings. Like Nan in the novel, he models for us how to map out our imaginary homeland. Therefore, I think the mapping metaphor will help us understand better the sense of home and identity of Chinese immigrants and writers. In Maps of the Imagination, the writer as cartographer, Peter Turchi compares writing, which he sees as a combination of inspiration and presentation, to cartography, which maps and guides a voyage. To ask for a map is to say, tell me a story. By telling stories of diasporic experience, these writers give readers the opportunity to explore a world they have never been to, or ideas that they have not confronted or considered. Turchi has pointed out that readers are not afraid of or even take delight in being lost. Quote, a prerequisite for finding our way through any story or novel is to be lost. The journey can't begin until we've set down a place somewhere unfamiliar. End quote. Of course, Turchi's idea is not limited to the diasporic realm, yet going to a foreign land naturally fits into his place somewhere unfamiliar, culturally and geographically. I argue that contemporary Chinese diasporic writers narrate their immigrant stories to those back home or in the Sinophone community around the world to make sense of their experience and establish their sense of place and belonging in the world. Through either overlaying their exotic maps of the U.S. on their nostalgic maps of their homeland, or creating affective maps of their personal immigrant experiences, or drawing political maps between China and the U.S. In addition, migrant stories like this can serve as guides for the Transpacific journey. Numerous scholars have pointed out the significant role of migrant narratives in shaping transmigrants' trajectory from Asia. For instance, Karen Kelsley's work dives into female internationalism in Japan and Japanese women's use of the West. I see Transpacific as a critical cartographic term being drawn by the writers, artists, and cultural practitioners who transcend national, ethnic, and geographical boundaries. The contemporary Chinese diaspora narratives in my project, moreover, offer an imagination of global Asia as an instance of a fluid asymmetry and ethereal structure of production and circulation in which the sense of belonging must necessarily be understood dialogically rather than territorially. The emergent field of global Asia disrupts the traditional idea notion of Asia and Asian American in area studies, which is defined and limited by geographical and national boundaries, and redefines Asia more broadly beyond geographical boundaries. Tina Chen, a foremost scholar in this field and one of the founders of Verge, argues that the notion of global Asia is inspired by structural incoherence, defined as, quote, the multiple overlapping and embedded contradictions undergirding the cultural, social, political, and economic dynamics of a place, both real and imagined, end quote. The ways in which the new Chinese diaspora writers map their immigrant experiences help us understand the contradictions of the homeland and the new land, both real and imagined. My book examines texts of different genres, from traditional novels to film and TV shows to virtual publication like blogs and websites on the internet, a much faster and more reactive media than the publishing industry. Chapter 1 opens with the problematics of the book, how to navigate the tensions between countries, families, and individuals. It focuses on the words of the renowned Chinese-American Anglophone writer Ha Jing, arguing that his novel A Map of Betrayal challenges physical territories and geographical entities by mapping out the complicated, torturous, and emotional trajectories of his immigrant characters. This chapter contends that Hajin's life and words display a multi-layered local global map that invalidates geographical locales, physical boundaries, and political state. Chapter 2 further explores the dynamic and tension between nation, 国, and family, 家, in Yan Geling's novel, The Criminal Lu Yanshi. A correlation and tension exists between the nation and family, inherent in the Chinese term 国家. The idea of home in Chinese culture is revealed in the interconnectedness of the two characters. However, during the Mao era, the notion of jia was threatened because the socialist authoritarian power and the unified Maoist ideology redefined the concept of family and marriage. This chapter aims to examine the complicated and paradoxical sides of home straddled between communist collectives and individuals, between guo and jia. Chapter 3 explores another side of negotiation between homeland and the new land, romantic and intimate love. In the narratives by new Sinophone writers such as Shi Yu's New York Lover, Chen Xian's Listen to the Caged Bird Sing, Rong Rong's Notes of a Couple, love represents a complex dynamic between home and diaspora. Constructing Sinophone romance literature as tourist maps, these new immigrant writers create a sense of homesickness and lovesickness to sell the experience back home. Chapter 4 turns to the cinematic and visual representation that highlights cinematic cartography in the Chinese diaspora. It looks at words that challenge the traditionally conceived view of the American dream and the Chinese dream, including Beijinger in New York and The Way We Were. By creating a palimpsest, Beijinger rewrites the map of American dream as being uncertain, while The Way We Were rewrites the map of the Chinese dream as more personal than political. My coda examines the newest site at which diaspora subjects can generate a sense of home through virtual space, internet-based multimedia writing like blogging, online magazines, and journals. Is an example of home as heterotopia, a space that is exotic and other, while at the same time correlating with other spaces of home. So today, I just want to quickly show an example from my chapter 4, which maps the American dream and Chinese dream intersect with each other through two TV series produced by Chinese directors, Beijinger in New York and The Way We Were, both of which describe Chinese immigrant lives in the United States. The two shows, roughly 2 decades apart, map out different trajectories of American dream and Chinese dream, particularly the Chinese imagination of these concepts. So I want to focus a little more on the Beijinger in New York, since you all are in New York. And this show reiterates the American dream in a new context. Written by Cao Guiling in 1991, this novel was later adapted into a 21-episode TV drama by Feng Xiaogang and Zheng Xiaolong in 1994. The story narrates a famous cello player in China, Wang, and his wife Guo Yin, who follow their fantasy American dream to head to the United States. Once arriving there, Wang realizes life is not as easy as they thought. He first works at a Chinese restaurant, then owns his own clothing factory. Then his wife works there as well. After some years, they have become wealthy. Their daughter comes back from China to reunite with them. Yet the good days do not last long. They lose all their money, home, and even the daughter. The story ends with Wang receiving a new immigrant and leaves him in the basement just like his wife's aunt did to him and his wife years ago, repeating this dystopic American dream. So I use the idea of the palimpsest as that the show tear up the surface of a regional American dream landscape and has described the lived experience of first-generation Chinese immigrants, This show redraws the map of American dream to be more uncertain while layering on top of the older immigrants' map of American dream. So in the beginning of the show, we can see how the cinematic effects. This is when they first arrive in the United States. Like you see the skyline of Manhattan. The cinematic effects in this TV series amplify the image of American dream. This is the scene capture their hopes, like in an excitement at their first ride to Manhattan from the airport. Wang calls out New York, Manhattan while pointing to the skyline. The aerial shot of the skyline overlooks the skyscrapers in the evening, while the song Stars and the Stripes Forever starts playing. The repetition of this song sets the tone of American patriotism on the one hand and the dreamy image on the other. The camera then zooms to the car where Wang looks as though he's conducting the orchestra playing to the song. Meanwhile, Guo busily looks around with curiosity, peering out the window when he's busy interrupted by the song. At times smiling to her husband, at other times pointing to something that captures attention. The medium close-up of the couple in the back of their aunt's car shows their extreme excitement entering this new world. It is as if they were composing new music with Wang's hand conducting. Passing through Times Square, Wang says with this excited tone, "New York, I, Wang Shimin, have come." The camera turns to a picture of the hustle and bustle in Times Square, where people are standing alongside the streets. He waves in the car as if he were a celebrity. While sitting in the car, passing through New York for the first time, Wang is conducting in the back seat of the car as if he were marching into the new world. A new chapter of his life is currently excited about. Even though only pure music is playing, the song conveys the message of pursue for liberty and freedom, like the lyrics render, sing out for freedom and the right, sing out for union and its might. The photography, cinematography, background music, color, lighting together paint a dramatic picture of a rosy American dream that excites immigrants. If anything, this is one of the heavenly image displayed in the TV series. Need to But quickly after they were dropped in the apartment. This excited image has ended. It comes with a hope of improving their life standard, but then like quickly, this is the image that when they were dropped in the basement apartment, the aunt actually even want them to return money, and they have this they see their basement apartment, the harsh situation, and they were very disappointed. So this sense of imprisonment contracts with the earlier scene when they longed for in the beginning. Meanwhile, the heavy labor work burdens Wang and challenges his view of home later on. And this is like the cage life in the beginning reflects them questioning the American dream. Besides the mirage of Manhattan and the Times Square, the show portrays and dramatizes some other heavenly images of New York, such as the Fifth Avenue's fashion district, David's beautiful lake house, Wang's big house on the Long Island, and the stage and auditorium when the orchestra plays. Yet the TV show shows the interchangeability of the opposite sides. The heavenly rosy images are prone to disappear. This is one scene when we get a long shot of a bridge across Manhattan, and then the camera lens moves to an overview of the landscape. The camera then leads the viewer to the side of the bank with Guo Yan sitting on the bench, her back turned to the viewer. This shift from a long shot of Manhattan to a zoom-in image of Guo Yan creates a great distance between her and the beautiful landscape of Manhattan, suggesting her long distance from her ideal American life. This scene is interrupted when Yin is court of God and has her bags taken by the thieves. We see a close-up shot of her with her disappointed look on the right here, followed by the overexposed image of Manhattan across the sea, as if the cruel nature of New York now overwhelms her. This place, like the off-color image, seems distant to her. her alienation and non-belonging all well up. In this image, one side is the beautiful, dreamy landscape of Manhattan. The other is the disappointed Guo Yan, filled with regrets and a sense of loss. One of the house spaces Wang first encounters is also a Chinese restaurant he works at. This figure shows a medium shot of him washing dishes. The focal point where the light shines on the mountains of both and placed in front of him highlights the challenges posed to him. The mountain of dirty dishes is like the hardship and pressure that immigrants face, like a task indeed. His face is obscured by the dishes all around him, as if he is insignificant. His diminished image buried in heavy work challenges his view of American dream once again. So this show paints New York and Manhattan, America as a palimpsest map. The old map describes the American dream as a material construct. He's still be able to achieve good money, big houses, fancy cars for his work. But meanwhile, it demystifies and deconstructs it like a palimpsest does to old manuscripts. It constructs and dramatizes New York as in-between spaces of the heaven, neither heaven nor hell, both or none. Yet it leaves traces of indenture and the American dream, and shows it was scratched, destroyed, and undone. While Beijing portrays those who come to the States for economic opportunities, this newer show, The Way We Were, features those who come to the United States for further education. The show quickly became one of the most popular idol dramas in 2018, directed by Liu Jiang and starring the famous couple Tang Yan Luo Jing. The story focuses on a few overseas Chinese students and their journey from China to the States, and then went back to China. The whole show actually surrounds this idea of return, like to come or to return. And its title taken for the poem when it implicates a strong promotion of returning to homeland. Using the title of 归去来, this TV series brings us back to the question, who goes and comes? Overseas Chinese students face significant decisions. It's especially true in the case of Xiaoqing not being able to be around her mom and get into accident and want to go back and take care of her. Those sacrifices, along with the hardship they experience abroad, displacement, and alienation, still play a crucial part in their sojourn. So this is the part that was repeating the old immigrant literature in the palimpsestic map, this old traces. So this chapter, I argue Beijinger is a palimpsestic map that writes over the traces of American dream, while The Way We Were adds a new layer that extends the notion of the Chinese dream, where talking about returning to home becomes a real possibility and help forge new home and identity. To conclude, the diasporic narratives described in my book create various maps that deal with a new sense of Chinese American being and belonging that is not bound by territories, loyalties, or identities. Whether a palimpsest that overlays the Chinese dream onto the American dream, or a tourist map that manufactures the effects of homesickness and lovesickness, or a multi-layered local global map, they all make up a cartographic practice that connects Transpacific spatial and temporal sites. What these Chinese diasporic words capture is not the static map with fixed borders and national state system, but the complex flows across transnational and transpacific spaces. The flows of the people and cultures and the linkages of borders that this diasporic population brings are moving maps of convergences and divergences, an important part of global Asia. Thank you so much. If you are interested in getting the book or reading more, this is the QR code that you can get online or just Google. And, thank you so much for coming today. This is also a discount code if you want to get a book with 30% off. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Lee. Yes, are there anybody that has any questions? If anybody has any questions, please raise your hand. If not, I guess I'll start with the question. So, Dr. Lee, I guess first of all, I'm kind of curious on like how you and your personal experience influence you, like, and how you like wrote this book, and I guess like maybe like your experience of writing the book, the process. If there anything that's like something new that you find out or something surprising, or like how did you like through the process of like writing this wonderful book, did you have like a new, I don't know, some sort of like perspective of like seeing yourself as a overseas student, or whichever kinds of the Chinese diaspora that you consider yourself being?
Thank you so much, Janice. I think you can jump in as well because I'm sure you have your wheel as a overseas student. And so, as I mentioned in the beginning, this book strongly connects with my personal experience. In fact, one of the thing my personal experience talk about that so the one is the overseas Chinese aspect, that I grew up in an overseas Chinese village. Then I went to Yong Hong's the hometown for college, and then later on became overseas Chinese student myself, as I mentioned in the beginning of the talk. So that's one. Another is actually the sense of home that I didn't mention in the book because it's a little more too personal, I think. So when I grew up in home, because of my personal experience, I didn't feel I felt home being at home. So I felt very interesting that, like, someone who actually grew up with, a physical space, but the physical space of home actually doesn't mean it could give us a sense of home, and in terms of belonging. So because of that, and then my combined experience of overseas Chinese students, so overseas Chinese, then I thought, okay, maybe I could find resolution or find comfort from their work. And I think I did in some way, right? It doesn't mean like, a lot of them, as you see here, like Beijing or New York, of course, is very dystopic. So obviously, some of them are also like sad, but some of them really, but reading a lot of them really make me feel like it's a very multi-layered concept, that home can be where we are, right? Like home is, or it's like regenerated, like reconstructed, like through our process, right? So I'm sure, like me, so I feel at the beginning of my diaspora journey, and then now I've been in the States for over a decade, then my sense of home changed a lot too. So I think that is also reflected from these writings, and then they help me to look at them in a real, very constructive way, I would say. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Lee. And we have a question that's asking, what do you think of overseas Chinese from South Asia in the US? And are there prominent authors that discussed in your book?
Oh, you Southeast, can I clarify? Is it like Southeast Asia?
Oh, South Asia, just said
South
South
Asia
Asia.
today.
Yes.
So yes, my book actually do just, focus on Chinese diaspora, like, mainly the new immigrants that coming after the 80s, right? Like most of them coming after the Tiananmen massacre. So the writings focus on the ones in the 90s and the present. So South Asia, I wouldn't say I'm an expert on South Asia, so I didn't really include it. But that's indeed really good, a good question in terms of, like, this Asian diaspora is itself a very multiplicity, right? Like there are different Asianness, like within this Asia itself. And as you know, like when we are Asians, like we don't want to be seen as like, we are all the same. So it's not a monolithic concept. So one of the things I try to do is even I focus on just Chinese diaspora, but I feel the idea of Chineseness, right? Like, or Asianness is a multiplicity. Yeah, but I haven't included any work from South Asia. But yeah, definitely would look more into it.
Thank you so much, Dr. Lee. I actually have another question. So, like at the end of your book, the coda part, you were discussing like how like there are now like online literatures and then creating I guess the sense of the cost of the home like through blogging and vlogging and like writing their own like little like kind of slice of life thingy and posting online. May I ask like because also sometimes I go on different like Chinese social media and stuff. I did notice that. Oh, and also you mentioned something about how like there's a reason like the potential reason a quote I think it's a quote that how a lot of Asian like American writers they're particularly like very I guess into the like a flash fiction
Mm-hmm.
and it's because that how we're living like compressed histories
Mm-hmm.
and just by like tangent off that like I was reading a lot of like how I guess just Asian culture is like a little bit it can be quite conservative and kind of suppressive in a way and how do you think that like may kind of like influence like I guess how Chinese diaspora like the community behave because also nowadays I think I don't know maybe the times change and then people are going like encouraging so-called quote unquote like the literature of going crazy so basically kind of let go of yourself let go of the kind of the wild side and I see a lot of interesting things over there and
Yeah, wow. First of all, thanks for reading it so carefully. This is how I can tell who reads my work, right? So actually the coda is not a finished work, right? Like I make it a coda because this is where I want my next project going to one of the directions for my next project. So I'm actually continue writing it as another paper. So that's a really great question. I think there's so much to think about. Like there's so much to talk about this, like the new AI technology generation. How does it change the whole landscape of Chinese diaspora? It's writing, it's life, because it's just so short spans. But one of the things I did really want to point out in the coda is that a lot of people actually didn't know that like nowadays like online fiction has been a big deal in China for the last 2 decades. But in fact, the earliest Sinophone, like written in Chinese, like Sinophone online fiction started in the United States by the overseas like Chinese. And a lot of people didn't know that. It started in 1980s, like late 80s, and when China didn't even like started like online writing back then, like a website. And the very first online website, literary website in China, 榕树下, was actually brought by overseas Chinese as like like a business enterprise. And of course, later on, it was sold and it actually gets dissipated. So it was just, I felt the Chinese diaspora in the United States plays such an important part in this whole online genre, and then needed to be discussed. But I think what you mentioned about like the fresh fiction in terms of because everyone consumed the literature in such a fast time, so it indeed like it's a much more popular genre, especially in the US right now. The current years actually the website already died down. They lack funding and all that. So in the past 10 years, they mostly follow the 公众号, the Weixin official, the WeChat official accounts. And that's also why that like there's the fresh fiction or the shorter pieces are more popular. So in terms of what you mentioned, like how it affects Chinese diaspora behave, I think it will have a lot of tension right now, like people are dealing with, right? There are some older generation that have resistance against this kind of new changes, but then the newer generations are more catching up to it, right? So there's always this tension. So these are the tensions I'm still like writing about and figuring out as well. But thanks for the question.
thank you so much, Dr. Lee. And we actually have more questions. So the first one is asking, what do you think that, do you think that the many Chinatowns in U.S. cities provide a network or map of home or belonging here for the Chinese diaspora communities?
Mm-hmm. I think Definitely, right? In some way, and it's very interesting, some Chinatowns are different from other Chinatowns. I actually have another paper on the representation of New York Chinatowns, and I compare like the old Chinatown and the Flushing and the old Chinatown and their representation in Ha Jing and Eric Liu's works. So one of the things Eric Liu's memoir mentioned, which is kind of true, is that Chinatown itself, as you all know, is also very exclusive, right? Like even he, as Chinese American, feel he's excluded because they are, just Chinese immigrants speaking Cantonese, and they are, they exclude from other Chinese American as well. So they're also like have this rigid map in some way that's bounded in their map, right? Like so that again, it's imaginary, but it's in some way is bonded and restricted. So that like the Chinatowns in New York are just so fun to study, but they do provide all the Chinatown do provide these communities in different way, and then they have these maps like differently, right? Like some for newer generation, some for older generation, right? Yeah.
Thank you so much, Dr. Lee. Okay. And thank you so much for the wonderful book. I had so much fun reading it, and it really like opens up like kind of different ways. And I feel like very like it kind of echoes with my personal experience as well as like it's very insightful. Thank you so much.
You're
And
welcome. Thank you so much for making it happen.
thank you for everybody for joining us.
Yeah, thank you all.
Thank you very much. The next time you're in New York, come see us, okay?
Definitely.
Okay. Have a wonderful day, everybody. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Helen.
You're welcome. We'll see
Bye-bye.
you
Thank
next
you so
time,
much,
everyone.
Dr. Lee.
Will I
Bye-bye.
get the
Bye.
recording
Have a good
later?
day.
I'll share it with you, yes. I should
Thank
get it. I
you.
should get it in like 10 minutes. Okay, bye. Bye. Take care.
Bye.